So today I'm going to be showing you how to first set up a WinCC Unified panel in TIA Portal. I'm going to be connecting a 1200 PLC and a 1500 PLC in this video. So the goal here is that we're going to connect these PLCs, add some tags, download the HMI, and then see the connection and make sure that's all good. So first we're going to add the HMI, and that, if you've ever done WinCC Comfort Panel, this whole process is almost the same and very familiar. The only thing that you don't see here in version 17 is kind of that first where it sets up the entire project for you if you select the PLC. That's not in version 17 yet for WinCC Unified, but I would imagine in the future they'll have something similar. It's just not there yet. Okay, so I have the 15-inch display MTP 1500, and I'm going to name the device name here Outlier Unified, and that's going to be our Profinet name later, which is important for communication in Siemens. Okay, the other thing I want to point out here is the version. It sets up version 17. There's also a version 16, which happens to correspond with version 16 of TIA Portal. My panel shipped with version 16 image, and they are not like backward compatible for unified panels. If you've worked with Siemens PLCs, the firmware and the TIA Portal version do not necessarily correspond like it does in Rockwell, but for the unified panels right now, it does. So make sure that you check the image version that you have in the unified panel before you start this process, because you might need to upgrade the image. And I'll have another video as to show how to do that, but it will not work if it's 16 with this process without using TIA Portal version 16. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and add this. Okay, and then we got to add it to our tree over here. Again, all looks very familiar. We're going to add a screen just to start so that I have something that will be able to be downloaded. You'll notice that it has this little green caret here. That means that it's the startup screen. And you can change that in runtime settings. I'm going to change the screen name to main. And we're going to come back to that later and add some stuff to it before we download. Okay, so next what we're going to do is set up the communication on the panel and to the PLCs. So let's go to Devices and Networks up here. And like I said earlier, the Profinet names are very important for being able to find the communication path on Profinet for Siemens. So we named our panel Outlier Unified already, and you have to know also the Profinet names for the PLCs, and that has to match. Because I'm online with them right now with these green check marks, I already know that, but say you didn't already have communication established to the PLCs, you'd want to make sure that those PLCs, you knew the Profinet name and you could browse to them with accessible devices. Okay, so the unified panel, it actually has two communication ports that you see displayed on the network here. One is a gigabit port, which I mentioned in the unboxing video, and one is just regular, almost for like I/O communication. So that's the one I'm going to use here. I believe it is X1. Yeah, so there's two ports there. And I'm going to set this up for the actual IP address that I have. It's in the one subnet. And then I'm going to connect this to this PNIE network. Oh, this is kind of a dumb thing that I just did. So when you're doing any hardware changes, you don't want to be online here. Okay. All right, so that kind of connects the model of the physical network. Then what we want to do in order to enable the communication between the PLCs and the HMI, where it can actually browse the tags, you have to add a connection. So if you click over on up here, this will change blue, and that, if you had more devices, that basically represents what devices could be connected to the HMI. And then you'll want to drag between which devices you want to talk to. So I'm going to talk both to the 1500 and the 1200. Okay, so you see that it now says HMI connection 1 and connection 2. And then if you go to connections, you'll see that represented here. We got which partner it is. So just to make it a little bit clearer when we're adding tags later, I'm going to rename this to 1500 PLC and 1200 PLC. Great. Close that. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I want to add some tags. And again, almost exactly the same as WinCC Comfort. Actually, I can't think of anything that's different. You're going to add a tag table, or you could add it to default, but I'll just add one for the purpose of this demo. And this is how you actually get the path from the addresses or tags that are in the PLC to the HMI and what they represent. So there's a few different ways that you can do this, and I want to show them all just in case you aren't familiar with how you might be able to do all of them. Some people might just type this in, which I think is like the slowest way. I think that's like probably most familiar to if you know other HMI platforms. But what's nice when you have everything in TIA Portal is that you don't have to type it in. You know which tags are in the PLC, and so then like you can just like directly bring them in and import them. So just for the sake of showing, I'm going to show PLC. I think I had run status as an integer. You select the connection. It's 1500. Let me rename this so it's clear. 1500. And then you could go in here, tag 1500 status. Okay, so then you now see that this PLC tag and this DB now means this, and that's what you would point to on the screen when you add a new object. So the other way to do it, though, is to actually drag them in from the data blocks. You can either drag them into the HMI tag table, or you could drag them into a screen. So first I'll do one where you drag from the data block. A couple different ways. So one is kind of opening it up side by side. Let's say add machine name. Okay, just drag it in. You want to make sure that you actually click this icon, otherwise it doesn't really work. But now it just takes the entire path and maps it. The only thing is here that I have almost the exact same tag path in the 1200 PLC with DB machine data. So I just want to make sure that I can designate between these two. Okay. The other way that you could do it from this is I have this details view open, which normally it looks like this. You can expand it, drop down. Well, first you have to just make sure you click on the data block. Then you see it in the details view, and pull that into command start. Excuse me, pull that into the HMI tag table. And again, I'm going to rename it just so that you can see the difference between that and the 1200. Okay, so those were the three ways that you could do it. And then finally, I'll do this now with the 1200 so that you can see it. You can actually just drag it directly onto a screen and it creates an object for you. So here's our base screen. I don't have anything on it. I'm going to go over to my 1200 PLC, program blocks, machine data. I'll do a side by side again. And let's say speed. All right, now you see the little plus. Now we have this object. So if you drag it in, you see that it has the IO field, and then it automatically connects to the object under General, process value tag. And you can see here, DB machine data control speed. This is the PLC tag that we just pulled from. And then going back to the tag table, oops, I think it automatically, yeah, it adds it to default. Say you didn't want it in the default tag table, you can go to show all tags, and then this shows the tag table, and then you can just select it's now in PLCs. Okay, and then just to check the communication to the 1500 as well, I'm going to add the machine name over here. Okay, I'm going to add a label so that I know the difference between the two. I think this one was the 1200. Yep. So I'm not going to build out an entire project here. This is just to show that we have communication. So I'm just going to go ahead and compile and download it. Before I do that, though, I'm going to go into runtime settings. And this is something that is different than WinCC Comfort. There's this encrypted transfer now. I pointed this out a few other times in different videos. There's a lot of extra security settings now with version 17. If you're using this in a production environment, you should definitely enable these things. But for the point of this demo, I'm going to disable it. Okay, I can go to compile. You can go up here, or you can do Control B. And oops. So it looks like I didn't change something correctly in the hardware configuration. So I'm going to go to this arrow right here. And I know the reason. It is because there are the 2 ports on the panel, like I said before. By default, they're in different subnets, but my base IP address that I changed X1 to is the same as the default in X2. So I have to just change this one as well. So I'm just going to go to 100, and that will now not be conflicting. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and download this. I need to actually, instead of starting search like you might be familiar with, I'm going to go ahead and type it in directly. This is because I'm in a virtual machine and it won't find it because it thinks that it is in a routed type situation. So this might be a good trick for you if you ever have to like remotely connect from an office into a panel. It's good to just type it in because it might not be able to kind of discover the devices. Okay, go ahead and load. Okay, now I already had a project on this HMI from before, and this is another kind of difference between Comfort and Unified. There's this concept of full download versus delta download. I just changed the communication, I changed the tags and everything, and so it's going to ask me to do a full download of the project, which is essentially what the standard was for Comfort. You didn't really have an option. But for the delta download, let's say that you just change some place on the screen, you can do the delta download and it doesn't restart the panel. And so if someone was operating it, they would just see, once they change screens, that object move location, and you don't have to like completely shut it down. So I'll demonstrate that once we get this going here. So full download. So the download finished. I'm going to go to VNC now, which is Smart Server. I already enabled this on a different video, but this is just so that I can remotely view it. Okay, and I'm going to start the runtime. You can enable this in runtime properties to just automatically start. Got my 2 connections here. Guess off the bat, I'm seeing that there's not a value in here. So let's go to 1500, go online, go to my block. Okay, great. I'm not getting any value in the 1200s speed here. And I would expect this to be a real value, and by default, that will show up at least with a 0. So looks like I had something wrong. So let's go back into the 1200 PLC here and see what's in my data block. Okay, so looks like the speed was accidentally set up as a string here. I need to change this to a real. So this is a good kind of example of how the tags in the PLC in TIA portal will sync now with the HMI if I change this. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this to real. And back in the data block, you'll see that I need to update this. Now it's real. I'm going to recompile this, and we'll definitely need to download since we just changed the value. You can see now there's a difference. Okay, and now I just changed this on the PLC, so it's going to break that connection on the HMI or to fix the tag. And what's nice is that because I recompiled it in the PLC, you can see it automatically updated to real in the HMI, but we haven't actually implemented that on the HMI yet. So I'm going to download that. And because I changed a tag, it should tell me to do a full download as opposed to the delta. Yep, full download. Restarts the project. Cool, so now we have a value here. I'm going to change it on the PLC just to make sure it's right. Monitor. Awesome. All right, so that was the basic communication between the PLCs. In my next video, I'm going to show how the Delta download works. You basically need multiple screens in order to really demonstrate it. So I'll catch that in the next video. I'm also going to show communicating to other types of PLCs, and I think that will kind of give you a good start in everything. So I hope you learned a lot today. I hope this is familiar if you've already used WinCC Comfort. And if this is your first time, I hope that it was pretty easy to set up either way. All right, thanks. I'll talk to you later.